So the other night I read about Joseph in the Bible. And if you know about the story of Joseph, you know that his father gave him a coat of many colors, that he was sold into slavery, went to prison, and eventually was introduced to Pharaoh and became basically the second in command in all of Egypt. He was the next person down from Pharaoh. I mean, the dude became royalty. And I've read this story several times, but the other night I noticed something. That when Joseph, who was hated by his brothers, when he was sold into slavery by his brothers, he was 17 years old. So as the story goes, he was 17 years old when he was sold into slavery. And he went to Potiphar's house. You know, God was with him and he worked for Potiphar, but Potiphar's wife basically framed him and Potiphar sent him to prison. So he was in prison for a long time. And then there were two men that were also sent to prison that worked for Pharaoh. Joseph interpreted their dreams. And when he did, he said, listen, when you get out of this prison, and you stand before Pharaoh, he said, tell him about me. Tell him that I'm down here. Well, one of the men went to Pharaoh, was released, and was restored to his position, and he forgot to tell Pharaoh about Joseph. Well, Joseph was in prison for 2 years before that man finally remembered Joseph. And then Joseph stood before Pharaoh, and Joseph interpreted Pharaoh's dream, and Pharaoh then made him second in command in Egypt. So he is living the life that he was called to live, right? Like he is riding in Pharaoh's chariots. He is like the governor of the land. He is doing well. But this is what stuck out to me. When I read in the Bible how old Joseph was when he started his position with Pharaoh, he was 30 years old. So that means that Joseph went 13 years in slavery and prison before he reached the land that he was going to receive, before he reached the position that he was called to be in. And man, that spoke to me, right? Like we live in such a microwave popcorn world right now, to where we pray and we ask God to show us the next day or the next minute. But we have to understand, man, that God's timing is perfect. Joseph was in prison in slavery 13 years and eventually got to where he was supposed to be. But if he hadn't been sold into slavery, if he hadn't gone to prison, he would have never met those men who would have brought his name before Pharaoh. So I want that to encourage you. Maybe you're in a season right now where you're like, man, this is not fair. Why am I in this season? Trust God that he knows what he's doing and that his timing is better than ours. Hope that encouraged you.